Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming down today. I'm Shalini.
Hi, thanks for having me, Shalini.
Great. Well, we're going to go through a human capital case today. I'm going to read you the prompt and then give you a few minutes to collect your thoughts. Okay?
Great, thanks.
Okay. So we are working with PharmaGlobe, which is a national pharmaceutical sales company. Their sales force has been giving incentives to doctors to endorse their products. The government has become aware of their actions and has levied on PharmaGlobe a 5-year corporate integrity agreement, which essentially states that if the company does not apply with the agreement, they will be punished. This is the third time the company has actually received one of these agreements, and the government has said that if they fail to follow the contract, severe penalties will be placed that will have significant impact on sales. So the company has asked us to advise on how they can establish a sustainable culture of compliance. The company is nationwide, but currently they only have one HR department and one compliance department for several divisions within the company. So how would you go about framing and addressing this issue for PharmaGlobe?
Okay, just to clarify one thing. You said they're nationwide, but they only have one HR and one compliance department, is that right?
Right, for several divisions.
Okay, for several divisions, great. Okay, so essentially we have PharmaGlobe and they've just been levied with a 5-year corporate integrity agreement that if they don't follow will result in a punishment that could affect revenues. And what we're asked to do is to come in and try to set up a sustainable culture within the organization and then maybe look at an organizational structure or change essentially maybe around the compliance in the HR department. Is that right?
That could be part of it, yeah.
Okay, great. Can you give me a few minutes to collect my thoughts?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thanks. So there's 4 issues that I'd like to look at or maybe address in this overall problem. I guess the first issue would be compliance. And then also look at the culture, maybe understanding where the culture is now and where we want it to be.
Okay.
Also, with anything this kind of problem, there's going to be a large change management issue, so maybe discuss some of that. And then finally get into the communications aspect. With any big change, there's going to be a lot of communications that are involved with that. So if it's okay, maybe start in compliance.
Yep, that'd be great, thank you.
Okay, great. So I think the first thing that we need to do is analyze the corporate integrity agreement and understand all aspects of it, and then also analyze the current rules around pharmaceutical sales and kickbacks, I guess, if you will, and then also look at what we're currently doing and see where there is a gap. So essentially a gap analysis on where we need to be and where we're at right now. And then maybe also looking at the structure of the organization. I know that's something you brought up in the prompt was we only have one compliance department and one HR department for a nationwide organization with several divisions. So maybe that's an area that we could look at a little bit further. And then finally, incentivizing. How are we incentivizing our sales force, and are we asking them to do one thing but incentivizing them somewhere else? So,
okay. Would you look at having the departments be, the HR and compliance department be regional then? Is that what you were suggesting?
Well, no, I think we need to do a little bit more investigation on that. It may be that our compliance and HR departments right now are sufficient and that the problem lies in either a cultural problem or maybe just not being trained correctly in the rules of compliance as they are now. So it could mean a structural change into having more HR out in the divisions, but it could also mean that we're just going to keep them closer and either build them up, or they may be sufficient right now. So I think that's something we need to look at a little bit more.
Okay.
And then, like I said, the incentives, it would be good to understand how we're incentivizing. So understanding the incentives program now, and then seeing if that is actually causing people to maybe offer these kickbacks or offer these incentives to doctors. So that's something that I think we need to look at within the organization as well.
Okay.
I guess the next area that we could look at also is the culture. And maybe here would be a good place to do a culture assessment. I mean, there could be two distinct cultures going on, the executive culture, but then the sales force culture. So I think a culture assessment across the organization may be good. It may give us some indications as to where we have gaps in our culture and why maybe our sales force is, engaging in these giving of incentives to doctors. So I think a culture assessment may be a good place to start here.
And if we find that there are issues with the culture, how would you go about establishing or changing the culture?
Yeah, so that would get us into our change management aspect, and I guess it's understanding what culture we want, and that's going to have to come from the top. I think leadership plays a big role in the culture, and whether or not they meant to create this culture where compliance isn't the number one priority. I think they're going to have to reinvigorate maybe a campaign to get culture to be get compliance to be the top priority. So, and I guess, when you're looking at culture, getting a group of people together to understand, what is the culture here? What is the culture, what is the culture in the sales force? What is culture in the HR? What's culture like in the regions? And then, so once we understand that, then we can really implement this change.
Okay.
Another part of the change aspect, I guess, is the training aspect. So I think what we're really going to need to do is have the compliance department work on developing a training program for the sales force. And it could be computer-based training, maybe classroom training, probably computer-based, just considering you're so diverse and you're so spread across the country. But giving the sales force the ability to know exactly what is required of them, what the law says as far as incentives. So I think the training component of this change piece is going to be really critical.
Okay.
And finally, getting the CEO involved is critical with any change. I think he needs to be the figurehead of the change process, but then maybe building a change team within the organization that has members from each of the major areas: sales, HR, compliance, the executive team, and any other parts of the organization that I may be missing.
And given this is a compliance issue, what do you really see as the role of the compliance department in rolling out this change?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ideally, I think you'd want the compliance department to act as a teammate for the sales force, so that there's a really great relationship between sales and compliance. I imagine a lot of the issues aren't the black and white, this is legal, this is illegal, but it's that gray area where the sales force may not really know the answer and just make a gut call. Mm-hmm. But if they had a compliance person in their team, that they can call and run this by, that could be a good way to utilize the compliance department and maybe act more as a team as opposed to this adversarial group that is always telling you what you can and cannot do.
Okay.
So I think developing that, and that may also start at the top as well. Maybe the CEO wants to appoint a compliance person to the C-suite, so that not only does he have somebody to go to when he has questions, but also it's a good kind of display, I guess, from the CEO that he is taking compliance seriously.
Okay.
So, and then with change as well, communication is going to be critical. So we need to understand who we're communicating to, so what our stakeholders are. And I think the stakeholders are going to be both internal and external. But internally, we need to obviously understand communication to the sales force, but also communication to HR, compliance. What are their roles going to be within this new organization? Communicating, obviously, like I said, to the sales force of what do we expect of them? Here's your training, but this communication needs to start probably right away. At least, I would imagine everybody in the organization knows that we have this corporate integrity agreement levied on us. So I think it would be really good if a message came out from the CEO that outlined, so this has happened. This is not where we want to go. This is not where we want to be, but we have a path of where we want to go, and keeping it positive and kind of echoing the message of compliance is important here.
Right. And how long do you think it will take to roll out all of this? The training, the communications. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
It's going to definitely have to be a phased approach. Obviously, you can start communications hopefully really quickly. The gap analysis and the compliance aspect, and understanding that will probably at least take several weeks to a few months before we really have a grasp on that. And then as we're doing that, I think the next piece after that will be the training aspect. So depending on what type of training we want to develop, whether it's classroom or computer-based training. If it is computer-based training, then that will probably tack on another 2 to 3 months. But luckily, we have the ability to probably turn that around relatively quickly, I think. And then the culture is just something that we're going to have to work on for a while. But I think all said, hopefully we can have this in a really good spot within 6 months or so, is my guess.
Do you think that's quick enough, given that we might be losing revenues and might have government levying other issues onto the company?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is gonna take some time, and we do have to start immediately. I guess I'm hoping that 6 months is we have the training complete, we have everybody, kind of the culture has shifted to where we want it to be. But obviously, compliance is going to take a little bit of time, as will the training. But the change stuff can happen almost immediately. We can get the messages out about compliance and what we need to do and where we need to go, and that it's not just about sales, it's about sales that fall within the compliance restrictions that we have as a pharmaceutical company. So.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you, Jim, for that information and for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.